Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce virtual California Business Policy Summit. Before we begin, here are some housekeeping items. Please utilize the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit questions to the speakers and panelists if time permits. The session will have live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. To access this feature, please select the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. For individuals who are tuning in from a mobile device, please email your questions to info@cahcc.com. If you have any technical questions, please call 916-444-2221 or email info@cahcc.com. Our official event hashtag is #CHCC2021. Please tag us on your social media posts. And now, please welcome to the webinar stage the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce President and CEO, Julian Canete.
Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of the CHEC, I would like to welcome you all to our 26th annual Public Policy Summit. In our 26 years of holding this summit, of course, this is our second virtual one, and we hope that in 2022, we will all be in Sacramento in person to visit with our legislators and to discuss policy issues. This annual summit has become the premier legislative conference for California's small businesses and Hispanic community. It gives us an opportunity to learn, engage in key issues impacting the growth of California and our economy. It gives us the opportunity to engage with policymakers, community leaders, and subject matter experts who are working hard on solutions and opportunities that grow California's economy and creates a better life for all Californians. I would like to thank our chamber members and business owners from throughout the state who are joining us this morning. And I would especially like to thank our sponsors. I believe they're up on the screen now, who have made this event possible along with other events. I won't go through the list, they're up there, it's long, but again, thank you to all of them for their support. And of course, I would like to thank our staff who works hard to produce these fine events every week and almost every other day. And finally, I want to thank the CHEC Board of Directors, your Board of Directors. They have been a board that has encouraged us to continue to create a strong advocacy program here in California and develop strong advocates throughout the state to advocate on behalf of you and other small business throughout this great state. And we look forward to working with them even more and all of you in the future. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the chairman of the Board of Directors of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, Mr. Bob Gutierrez. Bob?
Thank you, Julian, and welcome everyone. For over 40 years, the CHEC has been committed to bringing the issues and needs impacting Hispanic and small businesses to the forefront of both California and national economic agendas. The CHEC currently has over 108 certified Hispanic chambers, multicultural business associations, and community-based organizations. The estimated direct impact of the CHEC and its member organizations is over 50,000 Hispanic and small businesses. The CHEC also serves low-income populations, senior citizens, the disabled community, geographically isolated populations, multicultural groups, the LGBTQ communities, and key stakeholders. The CHEC's focus is proactive education and advocacy efforts on programs and policies that answer and meet priorities and needs of the California small business and Hispanic community. California's 14 million Hispanics represents more than 38% of the population and is home to more than 815,000 Hispanic-owned businesses, the largest number of Hispanic-owned firms in the nation. Our goal for this summit is for us to use our collective voice to advocate legislative issues for the small business community. Participants will take part in issue briefings and virtually engage with members of the legislature and Sacramento insiders, while gaining in-person perspectives in the legislative process. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the summit's first speaker this morning. Governor Newsom is widely recognized for his willingness to lead by repeatedly developing, advocating, and implementing innovative and groundbreaking solutions to some of our most challenging issues on a wide range of topics, including same-sex marriage, gun safety, marijuana, the death penalty, universal health care, access to preschool, technology, criminal justice reform, and the minimum wage. Newsom stuck his neck out and did the right thing, which often led to sweeping changes when his policies were ultimately accepted, embraced, and replicated across the nation. Newsom's top priority for the administration are tackling our state's affordability crisis, creating inclusive economy growth and opportunity for every child, and standing up for California values, civil rights to immigration, environmental protection, access to quality schools at all levels, and justice. On behalf of CHCC, we'd like to thank the governor for his leadership of the last year as we begin to come up from the pandemic. We are dedicated in working with you to continue the mission of creating a California for all. Please welcome Governor Gavin Newsom.
Thank you to Julian and Bob for your introduction and for the invitation, moreover, for the opportunity to address each and every one of you today. You know, it wasn't that many years ago I was lieutenant governor, and that was the last time I had a chance to address CHCC. But make no mistake, supporting California businesses broadly and the Hispanic community specifically has always been front of my mind. You know this well. Over 800,000 Hispanic-owned businesses operate in the state of California, making up nearly 1/4 of all of those businesses, all of our businesses in the state. And it goes without saying, COVID-19 has posed a major challenge to businesses large and small, with many owners unsure, particularly our small businesses, how to stay afloat. And that's why I was really pleased to sign a bill offering up to $7.6 billion for immediate action to provide an additional $2 billion for small businesses and specific relief grants. And I'm proud to say, by the way, that 55% of those grants have gone to minority-owned businesses. But we have to keep getting the word out about this money. So many people I talk to aren't even unaware of those grants, or moreover, even the larger $7.6 billion package. And that's why I'm so grateful to all of you. So grateful to the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for partnering with Lendistry in specific terms for their statewide outreach effort and to providing in-language technical assistance to thousands and thousands of small businesses in communities that are so desperate need of these grants and supports. We're all looking forward, we are all, I hope, looking forward to June 15th to fully reopen our economy and move beyond this blueprint. And as I've said many, many times, the only way we get there is to achieve the goal of getting as many folks that are willing and eligible to be vaccinated so we can reach that goal of fully reopening the economy on June 15th. Your partnership, CHCC's partnership with CDPH, our Department of Public Health, to educate small business owners and communities with the importance of these vaccines is critical in order to safely reopen our economy, get all of us moving again. Your partnership with other state agencies and departments have resulted, by the way, in contracting opportunities, training programs, and key resources for California's Hispanic community and their small businesses. I want to thank you, each and every one of you, CHCC, for helping us ensure opportunities, not only for the Hispanic community, but more broadly. And I assure you that your efforts not only have not gone unnoticed, but they are appreciated. So thank you all very much for this opportunity, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your summit.
Thank you, Governor Newsom. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce Vice Chairwoman of the Board, Veronica Corona.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It gives me great pleasure and excitement to introduce our next speaker. Tara Lynn Gray was appointed by our Governor Newsom to Director of the California Office of Small Business Advocate on March 19, 2021. Prior to her appointment, she was Chief Executive Officer of the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce and Chamber Foundation, where she engaged, educated, and empowered small businesses in California Central Valley. Gray has leveraged the green economy to advance equity, developed an unemployment and training program in green jobs for young adults 18 to 24 years old, and manage a network of organizations working to advance electric vehicle ownership. As part of the region's Drive investment plan, Gray was instrumental in developing the local initiative, Betting Big on Small Businesses. Thank you for that. Owned by women and people of color, which aims to provide economic mobility to entrepreneurs in disinvested neighborhoods, closing opportunity gaps, and providing cultural, competent entrepreneur education and technical assistance. Gray has been an advisor for Solano and Alameda County Small Business Development Centers, served as nonprofit program manager and director of operations, as well as run her own consulting business. I don't know where you find the time. Past and present boards and commissions include Central Valley New Market Tax Credit Fund, California Black Chambers of Commerce Foundation, Caltrans Small Business Council, State of California Employment Development Department, Small Business Employer Advisory Committee, California Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, Hospital Supplier Diversity Commission, and Women Impacting Public Policy. And I'm sure the list goes on. Again, please help me welcome the Director of the California Office of Small Business Advocate, Tara Lynn Gray. Tara?
Thank you, Veronica. Good morning to everyone, and thank you to the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce for having me here today for your virtual California Business Policy Summit. I am thrilled to be here. And as Veronica just said, I was recently appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to be director of the Office of the Small Business Advocate, which we affectionately call CalOSBA, and it sits within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, better known as GoBiz. My office supports economic growth and innovation and ensures that all California small businesses and innovative startups have the information and direct support that they need to better navigate resources, programs, and regulations. Our office serves as the voice, an independent voice of small business, representing their views and interests across the state and advocating for equitable access to capital, to markets, and to networks so that all California small businesses successfully start, manage, and are able to grow and become more resilient. Our offices have a long-standing relationship with the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce throughout and prior to the pandemic, most especially partnering to assist the small business community in providing key resources for recovery efforts and growing our ever-resilient California economy. Additionally, our office administers the California Small Business COVID-19 Relief Grant Program. And I really want to recognize the Chamber's partnership with Lindustry. The governor mentioned that earlier, but I definitely want to underscore it. It's critical that we have partners like CHCC that step up to the plate and help to do statewide outreach, which you all have done very effectively, most especially providing in-language technical assistance, which has been something that I have given great consideration, care, and work to over my career. It is very important and critical to our businesses to have in-language and culturally competent technical assistance, and you all are leaders in the state in doing so. So definitely want to give a shout out to you for that. We just really appreciate your invaluable work, and I thank you for your committed partnership and collaboration to serve California's small business community. And I look forward to doing much more with you in the future. Thank you.
The current COVID-19 pandemic will similarly lead to adjustments in the way we think, live, work, learn, shop, travel, and entertain. This panel will discuss California's economic environment and how California's communities and regions are driving economic recovery strategies through the state of California. Please welcome our panel moderator and president and CEO for the California Association for Local Economic Development, Gerbax Sahota.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a candid conversation on what's happening with California's economic environment. And specifically, thank you to the California Hispanic Chamber Board of Directors, as well as Julian and your team, not just for hosting this amazing summit, but for being great partners in supporting local economic development in California. As the moderator said, my name is Gerbax Sahota. I'm the president and CEO of the California Association for Local Economic Development. We have over 800 members that work with communities to help them grow their local economies, and with over 300 jurisdictions represented in that membership. So we're one of the largest associations in the country and the largest in the state. And it's with that bird's eye view and that local lens that we look at policy, effective economic development policy at the federal and state level. So I'm very excited to be moderating this panel with 4 regional experts that champion local economies and do that work. So today we'll be joined by Bill Allen, who's the president and CEO of the Los Angeles Economic Development Council, Paul Granillo, president and CEO of the Inland Empire Economic Partnership, Micah Weinberg, Chief Executive Officer of Cal Forward, and then Jim Wanderman, President and CEO of the Bay Area Council. Good morning, gentlemen. I see you all smiling, so I know you're there. All right, so if we can kick it off and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your organizations and your role in helping businesses and the local economy and the state economy as well. And so Micah, we'll start with you, please.
Sure. So California Forward is a movement to make California's government and economy work for everyone. And we take a regions up approach. So the other panelists you're going to be seeing today, my friends Bill, Paul, and Jim, are all a part of our California Stewardship Network, where we work on the state's most pressing challenges, understanding that things are a little different in the Bay Area than they are in LA, than they are in the Inland Empire, than they are in the Sierra. So, we're all over working on this and excited about today's conversation.
Thanks for joining us, Micah. All right, let's head down the state. Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hey, I'm Jim Wonderman. I'm president and CEO of the Bay Area Council. I've been in the job for going on 18 years, but the council's been around a lot longer than me, over 3/4 of a century. And the group was created as the World War II ended to form the regional economy in the Bay Area, which really wasn't a region until that time. And we work on the key issues that I think most of the regions around the state, their solutions may be different, but education and transportation and housing and workforce issues and those kinds of things. And our members are largely major employers, most of them private sector, but public sector, major universities and enterprise aspects of government and so forth. And it's a great organization, and I'm proud to be associated with it. I'm glad to be here today. I thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Jim. And Bill, why don't we go to you next, please?
Thanks, Gerbax. Thank you all for allowing us to be part of this conversation this morning. The LADC is celebrating its 40th anniversary as a private, nonprofit, public benefit corporation created by the County of LA to engage other stakeholders in the region to help build a more robust and inclusive economy. We offer business assistance. We operate the World Trade Center for Los Angeles that supports trade facilitation and inbound foreign direct investment. We have a research enterprise that reports on the different industry clusters and labor markets and trading partners and public policy issues affecting our region. And we try to engage our business, government, education, and nonprofit partners to create a more robust, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient economy for the residents of Los Angeles County.
Thank you, Bill. And Paul, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization as well.
Good morning, Gerbex. Buenos dias a todos. The Inland Empire Economic Partnership brings together the large employers in the public and private sector in Riverside and San Bernardino counties. So the region known as the Inland Empire makes up 11% of all Californians and is actually the 5th largest Latino population in the United States. So we focus on advocacy, on leadership, and research.
Great. Well, great to have all of you here. I hope you're ready for some tough questions. I know you guys have the answers. We're certainly looking to you for that leadership. So first, let's talk a little bit about what policies do you see that hinder and help economic growth, not only at the community level, but also at the state level. And if it's all right, Bill, if we can start with you.
Well, really, any policies that add cost or complexity to doing business in our state hinder economic growth. Any policies that exacerbate historic inequities that have deprived communities and populations from fully realizing the opportunity present in this extraordinary nation-sized economy that is California really need to be addressed. So we unfortunately have a lot of competing interests in our state, many of them very well-intentioned. We have a proud tradition of focusing on our environment and ensuring a more sustainable world. But sometimes that can work at cross purposes if business is not consulted in the development of those policies. And so there's a real opportunity for us to actually build economic opportunity and grow business and economic activity in this state through our green policies, but they ought to be developed in real conversation with businesses so that we can create the solutions and produce the solutions to our planet's challenges here. And the same is true often of well-intentioned efforts to protect the workers in the workplace, consumers in the marketplace. We would advise organizations like the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce to let your voices be heard, demand a seat at the table as these policies are being developed. In other states, I often hear from our larger employers in California, they are consulted by the legislatures and the governors of those other states as policies are being developed to ensure that they reach those important public benefit goals, but at the same time create economic opportunity rather than challenges and threats to businesses of any size.
Great. Jim, Paul, or Micah, would you like to add on to that? Maybe have a different perspective?
Oh, no, I agree with that perspective. I mean, you can kind of set your watch by California Policy Conference, how quickly do you get to housing, right? We don't need to spend the whole time on that today, but certainly any anti-housing development, any anti-home ownership policies in the state of California are a real hit, both to economic growth, but also to equity. Our employers, looking for people at all skill levels, they're struggling with the cost of housing. So that's something that unfortunately we just saw. Housing production went down 9% last year. So we are going, and I think that was supposed to be the year of housing. Was last year going to be? Every year was going to be the year of housing. No year has actually been the year of housing for a generation. So that's something the California legislature needs to get right and really is going in the wrong direction on.
Thank you, Micah. Paul or Jim, anything to add to that? Policies you see?
Yeah, I think there's, as we talk about equity, we have to look at the state's regions and regions that have for generations had inequities. And so for the inland regions, the Inland Empire, the Central Valley, the issue of baccalaureate attainment. For regions of over 1 million people, the Inland Empire has the lowest baccalaureate attainment in the nation at 21%. That hinders you from being able to participate in the modern economy in many ways. Now, so the Inland Empire population, 4.6 million people, half of whom are Latino, and you look at that baccalaureate attainment, it's at 9%. All right, that is an inequity that needs to be dealt with. And so, when we talk about funding for education, when we talk about outcomes, again, we do a lot of talking and not a lot of fixing.
Yeah, I would just, echo my colleagues kind of laid it out. I think California is an incredibly powerful economy, the 5th largest economy in the world. And we have tremendous advantages. But I think in more recent times, we're not playing to our strengths. And as Micah said, we stopped building housing, which just on the face of it is creates a really difficult situation when it comes to economic development. It creates displacement and really unfortunate consequences for communities. And I think the government of California, well-intentioned, as Bill Allen says, is trying to solve a lot of problems through government solutions and regulations and adding costs to create programs, when really the better solutions, our organization has found over time, the better solutions are market-based. They're by encouraging businesses to invest, private sector investment, job creation, giving people opportunities to have good jobs. Growth is so important. And I think we're chasing a lot of that out of California. It's why I and the Bay Area Council formed a new coalition of groups from throughout the state that's just started meeting to really discuss how to go about changing this particular set of dynamics. Because while we're doing a lot of things well, and again, intentions are good, I don't think we're helping the Hispanic communities, particularly in the state. Although it's on the face of it, some things may sound really good, but I think if you look at the numbers, you see a largely different story, and we need to get some solutions to this and change some trends. I think we all have this. We all want the same kind of positive outcomes. We want to have a clean environment. We want to address climate change. We want to protect the interests of workers and consumers and all those things. But I think, as Bill really eloquently put it, we need to have the business community firmly at the table, small business, big business, the people who are invested, the people who create jobs, so that we don't create missteps. And I think that's what we need to move toward that in the future.
So great perspective. What I heard clearly is the concern over regulations, adding cost and complexity, the housing issue, of course, educational attainment, and then not playing to our strengths. Even though we're well-intentioned and we have some good progress, we're not necessarily meeting the targets that we could meet if we were all focused in the same policy direction through consulting with large businesses and really with industry in general. So as you think about that, organizations like ours all kind of point to the state. We look at what is the state doing, especially in this environment where we're closely watching what new regulations or comes out of the legislature or out by executive order or guidelines that we see come out from agencies. But what can be done at the local level? So when you look at what are some regional concepts that you think will help California with economic growth, not just regionally for you, but also contribute at the state level? And Paul, if we could please start with you with that question.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a thread that you're going to hear that comes from my friend Bill Allen's comment about being involved. And business is not being invited into many policy discussions. And so I would just urge, especially the chambers, to get involved, to partner with organizations that can be a force multiplier. And so as a regional entity, one of the things that I did with my board about 2 years ago was to create the Inland Empire Chamber Alliance. And that's grown to 22 chambers in Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And as an economic development corporation, I have the staff, public policy director who really is excellent. And he really serves as the backbone to the Chamber Alliance and allows them to keep track of what's going on in Sacramento. And many of the chambers don't have that capacity. And so I wish I'd done it 8 years ago because it's been very successful in having our voice at the table, seeing the logos of the different chambers, of having chambers represent where members of the legislature live, and they very much want to have that voice. So that's just one region's approach. But I really recommend getting involved. We need to change the dialogue.
Yeah, I love that comment about being a force multiplier as well. That's great. All right, gentlemen, Bill or Jim or Micah, would you like to chime in on some regional strategies and policies you think would work as well?
Sure. I would add that there's a process that all of our regions have gone through. I'm not sure our state has gone through, which is a policy of developing an actual economic development strategy. And our regions have really shown tremendous leadership on this over the years, and very inclusive leadership, bringing business, government, education, labor, environmental communities, faith-based communities, social justice communities together to say, how do we create an economic strategy that has triple bottom line benefits, that really does create a more robust economy, but also a more equitable and inclusive economy, and advances social equity and advances the sustainability of our environment. We've demonstrated in each of our regions that we can assess the unique challenges, opportunities, strengths in our region and build a strategy and implement a strategy. We've been hoping that the state would, combine the thinking of the various regions and come up with a state strategy that was supportive of that. I think that's something we all should still be calling for. Ironically, our current governor developed an agenda for economic competitiveness back in 2011. I actually helped him with that when he was lieutenant governor. And it's a remarkable document that talks about developing industry clusters and investments in our talent development systems and in our infrastructure and in our policies. It's a remarkable document that should serve as a guide for a new state strategy, but one that recognizes the unique, distinct differences of the region. So it starts, I think, with recognizing California is made up of very distinct, dynamic economic regions, and engaging in your own region, being part of that conversation, developing strategies to build on your strengths and address your weaknesses and challenges has been very powerful in our community. We've developed a Center for Competitive Workforce, recognizing, as Paul said, that we did not have sufficient educational attainment, not only in the level of degree acquired, but in the relevance of that degree to our local labor market needs. And so we work with all of our community colleges across LA County that are part of their own regional consortium. We operate a Center for a Competitive Workforce for and with them that identifies the changing nature of work in our region so that our education partners, not just the colleges, but state universities and adult education programs, can adapt their curriculum and their short-term training programs to meet the current and emerging needs of our economy. We have industry cluster councils that focus on our traded industries. You can segment industries in a variety of ways. One way is traded versus locally serving. The traded industry clusters that sell a product or service outside of our region tend to have better paying wages and benefits and career pathways. They bring wealth into the region from other markets around the world. And so we work closely with them to try and stimulate their growth so that we can bring more wealth into our region, and then work with our population serving industries to make sure they have a fair share of opportunity at participating in that wealth creation in the region. So just a couple of examples of ways that we're thinking broadly strategically and then implementing specific ideas unique to our region's opportunities.
Yeah, let me underscore those two things that Bill just said. And just first, it is weird that we don't have state policy aligned with local priorities and regional strategies. Basically, every other state in the nation does. This is something that basically every country in the world does. The fact that, you don't want to get too heavy-handed about it, but the fact that we don't sort of have, these sort of, statewide aligned tools is very unusual. So we're not asking for something crazy. We're actually asking for, let's have an economic development like agency and department and capabilities at the state level. GoBiz does some good work with the limited resources that it has and a couple of grant programs and so on. It's not a question of a failure of individuals. We just don't have this institution that most places have. The other thing I want to underscore is the importance of what Bill said about cross-sector collaboration to develop these new economic strategies. So whether it's Propel LA and LA or the Inland Empire Growth and Opportunity, these sets of strategies have been developed, often led by members of the California Stewardship Network and others. And what's really important to understand is just how badly we've failed our disadvantaged communities over the course of the past several decades. And, a lot of people want to point the finger. right? It's those evil businesses, or it's those evil unions, or it's that evil government, or whoever it is that you've decided that the evil people are. But the truth is, this is a situation that we've all created together and that we all need to resolve together. So it's critically important to bring the equity groups to the table with the businesses, important but really hard, to co-develop strategies to get radically different outcomes in our regions, in our communities that aggregate up to the state. Because we're not going to have, this equitable economic recovery absolutely needs to include actual equity, but for that to happen, it needs to include actual economics as well. And that's what seems to be missing in a lot of our approaches to how this would actually work.
Again, no debate from me on what's been said, and to be a little bit granular about it, I think what's hugely missing in California is an investment strategy that drives incentive strategy that drives investment especially to the parts of the state that need it most. And that can accomplish a lot, and it's a fairly common feature in other places. And we just don't compare well to other places in this state when it comes to doing it. We have opportunity zones, but the state had a problem with passing a law that would put us on par with the federal government. So there's a lot of investment that could be coming to California, that even from California, that's going to other states. But we could go way beyond the opportunity zone concept, and we could be heavily incentivizing, for example, in the Inland Empire, in the Central Valley, we could reduce some of the restrictions on in the law, some of the regulations, just to make it easier to get investments to happen in the first place. And to, if we want to do, for example, manufacturing in the state, let's incentivize manufacturing. We've lost well over a million manufacturing jobs. Bill would probably have a better number than I can give you. But if we want to bring manufacturing back to California, let's make it real and say to the manufacturers, as we're onshoring back to the country, come to California. We'll make it easy for you to come here. We'll reduce or eliminate your tax burden for a period of years. We won't make you go through the rigmarole it takes to get a plant set up. We'll do something about your ridiculously high energy costs, these kinds of things, because when businesses look at opportunities, they have to look at costs. They're competitive institutions, and we just don't compete well. And we have the economic power to do so much better. The state has a massive budget and a massive budget surplus, and we should be looking at putting some of that money back into, very tactically, the communities that need our help and have historically had higher unemployment and more challenges. This is something we could do, and we should be and one of the things this coalition is going to look at is how to accomplish that. The politics of it are not easy, or it would have been done. So we have to overcome that.
So Gerbax, if I can give an example of what Mike is saying and Bill's saying. So the Inland Empire is a logistics hub of a size of maybe top 10 in the world. It is the lungs for the port of Long Beach and Los Angeles. The ports cannot be successful unless the goods that are coming into 42% of all imports, unless they're able to come into the Inland Empire and then be redistributed. So it is a major job creator. It aligns with our educational attainment. It is something that if two people are involved in it, can get you into the middle class. And yet from all the alphabet soups of the state, right, it is under attack. And we have just gone through a pandemic like no other, we hope, that has made the importance of fulfillment of goods being delivered to our doors, our drugs being delivered to our doors, right, has radically changed the way we purchase goods. And so there's no reason why we couldn't in the state of California, and we're championing this in the Inland Empire, to create a sustainable center of excellence in logistics. But rather than make that investment, right, we just continue to fight what is, I think, a false narrative of dirty trucks and bad jobs, when in fact, the trucks continue to get cleaner. We someday hopefully will have an electric truck that can haul big loads, but we don't yet. And that we should be leading in clean technology and logistics. We should be leading in drone delivery. All of that is possible. So you could have jobs, you could have innovation, and you could have the state climate goals. But instead of aligning, we continue to make it hard for business to even survive.
So I'm going to bring you guys back. We have a little more time than I thought we would. So I wanted to hear kind of the full space where you're at on this policy piece, but I feel like we came back to the state. And obviously there's challenges with some of the state work. We know this. We work on policy issues together and oftentimes line in our policy work. But that said, irrespective of the state, and I think this is a different question, what can be done at the regional level? And we started down that path. Paul, you talked about collaboration, right? Bringing the chambers together. Bill, you talked about a strategy. Micah, including the equity groups to make sure we are really getting all the opinions and including everyone at the table. So let's talk about regional approaches. What ideas, what policies at the regional level, irrespective of what we see at the state level, because I don't disagree with anything that's been said, but let's get closer to the community and closer to the businesses. So we're talking at the regional level now. What do you see as policies in that space, whether it's county, multi-jurisdiction? What do you see that's been effective? Or maybe you have a suggestion of something that should be changed that would make that would really contribute to the growth of local and regional economies. So anybody want to take that on?
Rebex, maybe just one example of tying some of these themes together. I talked earlier about pursuing our environmental sustainability initiatives as a state and as a region, and how you might do that in a way that has economic advantages for the state and the region. Many years ago, we knew that we had to clean up the activity at our ports, and remarkable work has been done there. But in many cases, it was adding cost to the operators of the ports, and they were buying in solutions from other places around the country or around the world. We started hearing our Metropolitan Transit Agency, Metro, talking about the need to clean up its bus technology because it's one of the largest bus fleets in the world. And we realized that there were companies around the world that we were meeting with in our foreign direct investment attraction efforts who had technology. So for example, a Chinese company called BYD had the ability, and they were the world leader in manufacturing all electric emissions-free public transit buses. And we brought them to Los Angeles County and to an area of Los Angeles County, the North County, that had more affordable housing, that had business-friendly governments, that had more available land, so they could acquire land and build out a sizable factory where today, in an American subdivision of that company, an American subsidiary with American employees, they employ over 800 people in well-paid jobs, manufacturing, assembling, delivering all electric emission-free transit buses. And we helped encourage the attraction, not with a whole lot of tax incentives or free land, although there were some local incentives provided by the local city or the county. More so, it was working with Metro to encourage some pilot programs and with other local transit agencies to encourage some pilot tests of their technology, and then encouraged Metro to award points in their procurement process for local manufacturing, which we could do because of our Measure M and Measure R sales tax measure, where we locally were paying for these technologies. It wasn't federal dollars that wouldn't allow us to award local procurement points. And as a result, BYD received very large orders to make significant numbers of buses to make this the cleanest, quietest, most modern fleet in the country. And their competitors took notice. US competitors on the East Coast, Canadian competitors, and others started realizing they were going to have to come to Los Angeles to win procurement opportunities against BYD. And now we have an industry cluster in Los Angeles with Proterra, with New Flyer, with BYD, and others still coming to build all electric emissions-free transit buses that will provide thousands of jobs, millions of dollars of economic benefit, local tax benefits as well. So it's an example of working with business and government, and education partners stepped in to train the workers. Our local labor unions, by the way, worked with us patiently to allow these companies to get up and running and get some stability before they tried to organize them. And so there was actually a healthy and mutually beneficial organizing process that took place. But there are ways like that a region can look at its strengths, needs, opportunities, and build an industry cluster of its own. We're now looking at doing that with the ocean economy. San Diego has done great things with the ocean economy. We're looking at all the coastline along LA County and our activity at our ports, and realizing we should be doing more to build our ocean economy. So I think there are specific local strategies you can employ unique to each of our regions.
Yeah, I like that comment, unique to the regions, because I do think, in hearing your story, what a great success. How do you replicate that if you're maybe in a small rural community, or you're in one of our eastern counties that doesn't have that level of urbanization and the population center? Anyone want to chime in with that?
Yeah, I think the key thing is we need to do some organizing, right? In fact, it's more critical for these, more far-flung areas to have regional entities than it even is for the folks on the coast, right? Who are going to kind of naturally see each other here and there, wandering around wherever Jim wanders around in San Francisco, and others. And when you look at both our councils of government and our private sector civic leadership groups, they're primarily, with some exceptions, concentrated on the coasts. And so you've got some very big like councils of government, you've got ABAG, you've got SCAG, of course, and so on. And then the rest of the state is this kind of pockmarked, like, individual county transportation agencies and so on. So we really need to have these regional groups to empower the, inland California, Northern California, and so on, if we want to see a better set of economic outcomes there. It's just, local economic development practitioners such as the one that you represent, Gerbax, are doing absolutely amazing work. And it's extraordinarily difficult. They've lost budget. They might have half an FTE in a small town. It's just not possible for them to do what they want to do without broader regional cooperation and broader regional support that you see in a lot of the other parts of the state.
Paul or Jim, anything you'd like to add to that?
I just say the Bay Area Council, since its inception, was always about creating regional solutions in the northern part of the state, northern coastal part of the state. When at the time we started it, you had a bunch of cities that had some urbanized populations that had been around for a while. The rest of the region was mostly farmland and pasture and hinterland. And the first major project we took on was the creation of the regional transportation system called BART. And we created that in the 1950s. It was built and operational by early 1970s. And what a huge economic development tool that was. In much more recent times, we persuaded the legislature to pass a law that allows the Bay Area region to vote on public finance measures to support affordable housing. So affordable housing is a huge issue in our region. It is really a tremendous weight on the economy. And what's been happening is because of the housing prices and the cost of living been so out of sorts, the communities of concern get hurt the worst and are being displaced at continually fast rates. And it's very, very discouraging, and it's harmful for them, and it's hard for those communities. It's harmful for everyone. So we really need to get down to brass tacks on this. And so I would predict within a couple, the pandemic kind of interceded on this, but I suspect within a year or two, we'll see a measure go on the 9-county Bay Area ballot for voters to vote on. It'll require a 2/3 vote, but I think it's something we probably can get. And at scale, for the first time, be able to manage the process of building affordable housing, which is really our number one. If you ask employers in the Bay Area, what's the number one problem facing the region, your business, it's their employees' ability to see a future in the areas. And we're not the only region to face this. But so we've been at the regional solution game for a long time. A lot of pushback comes from the local communities. They don't like it. They have land use control. We have home rule in California. They want to determine what gets built in their community and the shape and face of that. And so we have a lot of, in terms of the housing issue, we just face a lot of resistance based on how some local communities feel about changes that take place, and the laws and regulations which favor delay and increasing cost, and make it much more harder to be able to actually create housing opportunities for people at all income levels. So I think this is something we've been doing and other regions could potentially do, but it may be different in the Bay Area that has its own set of problems with its its regional ability to sort of apply regional standards or opportunities to economic development overall. I think some other regions have actually done a lot better than we have at coming up with strategies that are realistic, pragmatic strategies for seeing what the future of our economy can look like.
So as you guys are talking, I feel like we're coming back to Bill's original comment about it being specific to the region, right? Identifying those needs, opportunities, doing your SWOT, or just assessing where there's a chance to make a difference. And Micah, I want to really thank you for recognizing the local economic developers. I mean, with our organization, we represent state, regional, and local economic developers, with the heavy emphasis on the local folks that are doing the work, city and county staff that are interfacing with businesses daily. And they do work really hard. And there are issues once you get out of the jurisdiction, to not because they don't want to work regionally, but because there are land use issues. And if a jurisdiction has a strategy, is a regional strategy inclusive of that and those goals? Like, how do you not just partner and align up, but partner and align down and make sure they're included as well? Also, Micah, to your specific point about the rural regions of our state and the interconnectivity there, we are seeing more and more regional groups. I think you're seeing that in your stewardship network.
We're working on it.
Yeah, I think that we would all agree one of the challenges in those communities is often the landscape itself, how to come together. I mean, obviously it's made easier with Zoom these days, but if broadband's an issue, which we know it is, I mean, that further complicates it. But we've seen great partnerships across the state built out of necessity, I would say, in the last year as we're looking at recovery. And it would certainly be great to see those partnerships continue as they look at local and regional solutions. And really great to hear your ideas and some of the examples you've shared with what's going on and what you've been able to accomplish. Now, we're going to take it even closer to the business level by, let's talk a little bit about, what do you think business owners need to do in order to be resilient? So what are your tips in that space? We've talked state, we've talked regional, a little bit of local. Now let's talk about the businesses that are primarily our audience today as well.
So are we allowed to talk about broadband now?
You
I hope
can, but we're going to get to
broadband
it.
later? Broadband's later? Oh no.
It's later. It's later.
Okay. Well, maybe just a preview of coming attractions then. Broadband has been so important for business resilience, during this time. And we'll get into later some of the details about what broadband should look like, but just to be directly responsive to the question, the trend toward e-commerce has accelerated. That was a secular trend, not just a cyclical trend. I mean, this is going in that direction, and this year accelerated it. Work from home is not going to be at the level it's been over the course of the past year, but employees and others are really looking for telecommuting options. You name it, businesses need that broadband to be resilient, because this may not be the last pandemic, right? This may not be the last challenge where we need to make sure to connect with each other remotely. And so, we talk a lot about broadband in terms of the broadband access for individuals, and that's good and right. But we need to make sure that we're also talking about broadband access for companies, which often requires substantially higher speeds and bandwidth and all the rest of that. And so that's one thing that we need to make sure to deliver for businesses in order for them to be more resilient.
I would
Is
just
there an action, Micah, that you think that businesses could take to somehow support that?
Well, I mean, I would like to see, okay. I would like to see businesses support an all of the above strategy on broadband, right? Understanding that, driving fiber through granite in the mountains is very different than, situations where they might have a lot of fiber in the ground, but it's not accessible to consumers, right? So, that's a really good example of radically different things that are needed region by region. And so the business community should align around an all of the above strategy, which leverages private investment, includes public investment in middle mile infrastructure, includes innovative smaller private companies, and so on. These things often get built up as, is it market-based or is it public? When almost everything in the entire world is some kind of public-private partnership. And we're almost always asking, where along, this continuum do we want to fall? And, what kind of tools, whether they're public or private, do we need to bring to bear? So, to the extent that the members of the, Hispanic Chambers of Commerce are advocating on this, I'd really like, to see them and others advocate really for an all of the above solution on broadband so that our businesses can be substantially more resilient and our employees as well.
Great, thank you. All right. Team, what
I would
would businesses be doing?
Well, so first of all, I completely endorse everything Micah just said, and I'm going to take his all of the above framing even further than broadband, which I definitely want us all to come back to because I think it's a real opportunity before this state and our regions right now. But think about all of the above approaches to your own business resilience. And I'm thinking about the program that CalEd and I think GoBiz are partnered in, the Outsmart Disaster Program. We created an earthquake guide back in on the 25th anniversary in 2019, the 25th anniversary of the 1994 Northridge earthquake in our region, which frankly is how I got into this work of economic development. I was running a Hollywood studio in those days, and the earthquake devastated our studio. The stage where we shot Seinfeld literally collapsed, and we could not produce the #1 show on television. Our administrative building, the ceiling collapsed. There was no cloud in those days. We were forbidden by the city by red tagging our building from going in and getting our own computers on which were stored all the scripts for that week's shows, which could continue shooting on stages that hadn't collapsed. I mean, we realized as a major motion picture and television production company, we were not resilient. And so I got involved with creating the San Fernando Valley Economic Alliance to help rebuild the San Fernando Valley economy back in the late 90s and served as its first CEO. But it became powerfully clear to me how we were not fully prepared for that sort of economic interruption in our business. Other smaller businesses who didn't have the capital access that we had to survive failed completely in the San Fernando Valley. So on that 25th anniversary of the earthquake, we brought together hundreds of business leaders in the San Fernando Valley and said, okay, we've had 25 years to get ready. Who really feels ready for the next earthquake? And no one raised their hand, not one single business. And I said, well, are you ready in terms of securing all of your intellectual property in the cloud, away from your, no. Have you secured your supply chain in the event of disruptions? No. Have you got sufficient capital in reserve? No. And it was just stunning to me that not one business felt they were prepared for the disruptions. And then we saw that when the pandemic struck, how many businesses were not able to pivot to a digital relationship with their customers. They didn't have sufficient working capital. They didn't have their supply chain secure. And so I think our businesses have to take an all of the above close look at themselves and say, as Micah said, there will be other pandemics, there will be other major earthquakes, there'll be wildfires. There are so many sources of potential disruption to our businesses, large and small. And there are so many tools available to us now. And the LAEDC Earthquake Guide at ladc.org/EQ is available in English and Spanish. And the Outsmart Disaster Program is designed to help us all focus on being prepared and fully resilient. So I say we take an all of the above approach to making ourselves completely resilient to disruptions that we know will come. If it's predictable, it's preventable.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks for mentioning Outsmart Disaster as well. I think when we talk about tools like the resource guide for that you guys developed for earthquake preparedness, as well as Outsmart Disaster, these are great checklists and planning documents to help businesses really think through what is our risk, where does it lie, and how can we address it in advance. And I mean, that's half the battle when we're talking about recovery. What have we done in advance to be resilient? So thank you for sharing both of those. All right, Paul?
So I would add to Bill's comments that there's opportunity. The economy is being injected with trillions of dollars, right? And I think there will be opportunity for small business to take advantage of that. And so you need to be aware of the programs that the government is going to be rolling out. I would also say that COVID has disrupted our lives, and it's disrupted the way we do business. But there's upsides to that. As Micah mentioned, what we're doing right now, virtual work. How many of us were able to make it through without an office? And the coming wave of automation, and we know that the automation wave has probably been moved forward about 10 years. And so we're going to see robotics, and we're going to see artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality. And even if you're a small business, I would say don't be afraid of that. There are opportunities in this technology for you to better your production and your bottom line, and be resilient. And so what am I talking about? Well, McDonald's is about ready to roll out an artificial intelligence that when you roll up to the drive-through and you make your order, you're actually talking to a robot, okay? And the robot it makes the communication between human being to human being, which is sometimes, stressed. It cleans that up. It makes gets you through the drive up faster, okay? And it doesn't make as many mistakes as the human being taking the order makes. Now that may sound really bad for the person in that job. I know that, right? But that's another reason why we have to be training people for the future, because this technology is going to come. And I've talked to small businesses in the Inland Empire that never would have, they did not want to talk about robotics. And yet now, because of the pandemic, they know that they need to. And it's not about people losing jobs. It's hopefully about people getting better jobs.
Thanks. I would just say ditto to all. And, I think, last year, a couple of months in front of us, and then a year ago, we were experiencing 5 of the 6 biggest fires burning in our state at the same time. And we've seen, the almost destruction of the Oroville Dam spillway, which would have created a massive flood if it got as bad as it could have, and had to be rebuilt. And that was just a couple of years ago. And, we've seen, I think, the hottest day ever recorded on Earth in Death Valley last summer. And we're in the second year of a drought. So we're experiencing, whether we like to acknowledge it or not, we're experiencing the effects of climate change, and they're having a profound impact on our state. And I know, because we work on these issues with our members, and we've led an effort called the California Resilience Challenge to identify some solutions statewide, helping communities develop ideas for addressing these areas. There's a lot that's going on in the companies to prepare their facilities better than they would have, because we've really been faced with some situations which I think have alerted the companies to make those kind of investments and think about that. I think this issue of remote work is really important, because remote work could be a good thing for California, because on a good day, people should want to come to California and work here. This is an opportunity for people all over the country to say, if there is a remote work opportunity, I can now live in my favorite state, the place I always wanted to live, the place people used to come to, the state we used to write songs about people coming to. Haven't been many songs written about it lately. But we also could see a lot of loss of economy and jobs. And so far, that seems to be the trend, although it's very, very early. And some regions of the state are beneficiaries. Inland Empire may be receiving some jobs that are flowing out of LA, which has been really hard hit. The Bay Area has been kind of hard hit. Sacramento's been a beneficiary. So, there may be some shifts, and some of those may be good and some of them not so good. But overall, I think we have to have a strategy around how to keep jobs here in the state, because when people leave, they take their economy with them. And now, if you can, we have a number of companies in the Bay Area who said you can keep your job, and you never have to come to the office here in our headquarters. You can live anywhere you want. Not too many companies have done that, but a bunch have, and hopefully it's not too big a trend. But we'll see. I think the dust hasn't settled yet on the pandemic. So I think we need to be very alert to all of this and strategic about these kinds of things. The one thing I don't want us to do is put more burden on business at this point. I really think it would be a big mistake, and there's a number of tax proposals that are currently before the legislature to increase
Tim,
tax.
before we get into any of that, I'm going to bring you back for some specific advice to the businesses, because we only have a few minutes left and a lot of questions that are lining up in the queue. So specific advice for businesses. Check out that legislation, perhaps.
Well, I would say be aware of on the resilience factor. There are groups like ours and others that are working on these issues, and be part of those committees that are addressing these issues, so you can learn best practices, see what other companies are doing, because there are some pretty innovative things that companies are doing. And on the taxes, I think that why don't we save that and see if that'll come up in some other, taxes and regulations. This is just not a good time to heap on more cost, because businesses, we want our businesses to be resilient in California, not in Texas, not in Nevada. Those are great states. They offer a lot, but we want to keep our businesses here, their growth here, and their vision of the future here. And we are presenting some challenges, and our environment is presenting some challenges. So we have to double down on this, I think.
All right. Thank you, Jim. All right, you guys, I'm going to keep my promise to Micah. We're going to talk about broadband, but you've got 2 minutes, and then we're going to move on to some positive closing thoughts from you, and then to some Q&A. So 2 minutes, broadband, go.
So go ahead, Micah, kick it off.
2 minutes for all of us, or 2 minutes for, oh my goodness. Okay.
30 seconds each.
I know, right? Well, so there's some great legislation, that businesses and the chamber should be supporting, both regulatory changes in SB4 and AB 14. There's a big broadband bond. There is a significant ask for, a public middle mile network. This is exactly, so businesses ideally are good at budgeting. We'll just assume everybody here is good at budgeting. And when you have a one-time windfall, you need to spend it on one-time infrastructure investments. And that's what businesses need to be advocating for us to be doing in the area of broadband, versus increasing the state's operating costs in the context of a growing operating deficit. So that's kind of a state budgeting thing, but chambers of commerce are active on public policy, and that's what they need to be insisting that we do on broadband.
I'm going to give my 30 seconds to Bill Allen.
Thank you, Paul. Look, to us at the LADC, this is an equity issue. We have 1 in 4 people in this state live in LA County, and 1 in 4 low-income residents of LA County does not have high-speed internet access in their home. We have very high adoption in upper-income communities and very low adoption in lower-income communities. And part of the problem is infrastructure deployment. Part of the problem is the affordability of the rate options offered where there is infrastructure available. Part of the problem is devices. Part of the problem is digital literacy. But part of the problem is we have failed to recognize that the internet is really a requirement of modern life. It's as essential as electricity in our homes. If we're going to be able to work remotely, as most of us on this call have been able to over the last year, we need a certain standard of internet service in our homes. If we're going to be able to study remotely, we need a certain standard. Our low-income households tend to have more people living in them, and yet they have the lowest speeds and bandwidth and quality available to them. So they've been disproportionately affected. So if we want to have a truly inclusive economic recovery, if we want to improve educational attainment, as Paul was talking about, if we want people to be healthier and avail themselves of telehealth, then we've got to get serious about closing the digital divide. And we can do it. As has been said, this is the largest state economy in the nation, one of the 5 largest economies in the world. Between the U.S. commitment to addressing this, the state commitment to addressing this, and our growing civic realization of the inequity associated with failing to solve this, this is the moment to do it. And we've all got to devote a portion of each day to saying, how am I going to help us close this digital divide for every resident of California?
Thank you, Bill. Great points. Jim, anything you want to add on? 30 seconds.
You know, I think at this point, you know, broadband should be a right. Everyone should have the right to broadband. We need it, and we should figure out how to deliver it. And it's different in every part of the state. You know, amazingly, in the Bay Area, where you think everyone has broadband, you know, try holding a mobile phone conversation as you're driving down Highway 280 in Silicon Valley. So it is something I think, you know, we all should commit to. We need to have it now, and we should work on this together.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for raising the awareness and talking about it today as well. So before we go over to questions from the audience, there's one chance that we're going to do to close up this portion of the panel with some hope for the future. So what signs or observations give you hope in the strength of our economy as you look forward? So while you're thinking about that, I'll give you my example, which is it's so great to see folks at the local and state level that understand that now is the time for action to make sure that we do have a sustainable future, that we are focusing on the economy. This conversation is just an amazing example of that. And we know that there's several, that these are happening across the state, locally, federally. Just the attention to the issue seems like it's been so much more at the forefront than it ever has. So that's something that gives me hope. How about you guys?
Well, what gives me hope is that Micah's running California forward, you know, because he's, you know, I think he's really brought a lot to it. And, you know, I think, as was said earlier, while we have a lot of concerns, the way the regions have come together and work independently and together in collaboration around, you know, these issues is really critically important. It's a very, very big and diverse state. And to have this kind of leadership on this really understands it, you know, I think gives us a lot of opportunity for the future. So I'm very encouraged by that. And I think ultimately the state is going to have to take notice that, you know, that its parts are ready to be, you know, become greater than the sum of the parts, if the state would just help a little bit.
Anyone else?
So I would say, I fancy myself a historian. So if you look at history, after great challenges, humanity finds a way to better itself. And so I think that a worldwide pandemic should make us more aware that how connected we are, how we need to be responsible for one another, not just in this country, but throughout the world, right? I think that when things like this happen, humanity innovates, we grow, we get smarter, and so that gives me hope. And then as a Latino, I think that I think that the Latino community is on the verge of taking its rightful place in the state of California. We are a huge demographic. And I see us being involved much more than we have in the past. And we're hardworking, and we need to take that hard work, and we need to make sure that our voice is heard as we talk about these issues of jobs and of education and of public policy.
Thank you. Bill or Micah, anything you'd like to share?
I would really affirm, first of all, the importance of the Latino population as the growing majority of our state, and the incredible entrepreneurial character of that population, I think, bodes well for California's future. I would also add that the way we all pivoted as individuals and systems across the country, the nation, the world in the face of this pandemic gives me hope. The way we quickly transformed our education process from in-classroom to remote learning and provided hotspots and devices. Despite the deficiencies of some of those, it was remarkable how quickly we acted when we realized we had a crisis. If we can take that same sense of urgency and develop permanent solutions to these obstacles to equity and opportunity, it gives me hope that we can really transform our economy and our society into one that is truly more inclusive and equitable.
Great, thank you.
I guess just finally, I really get a lot of hope from what we've been seeing in this process we've been running in the Salinas Valley. So we've talked about some of these regional inclusive economic development processes, and you know, when the pandemic hit, we just figured people aren't going to have time for regional inclusive economic development, right? They're going to have other priorities and so on. And what we found is that people really doubled down on this work. And so we have, you know, authentic community organizations. We have the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce. Kate Roberts, another Stewardship Network member who runs the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, has poured her heart and soul into this. We have lots of different employers involved in really asking and trying to answer the question in a fundamentally different way. And so if this pandemic is able to, if we're able to, you know, continue to connect through Zoom and, you know, continue to deal with, there were also major fires in that area over the course of the past year, and understand that, like, we've done a lot of like work on symptoms, right? Like just trying to keep people alive, trying to keep people housed and so on and so forth. But ultimately, if you don't deal with systems, you're going to keep dealing with symptoms. And so for people to like be able to prioritize this kind of systems change work, really re-engineering the economy for equity, re-engineering the economy for more environmental sustainability and vibrance, then, you know, it's just been really, really giving me a lot of hope to see that.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We've come full circle from challenges to opportunities, solutions, and now hope. So it's been great moderating the panel and hearing your thoughts. And we're going to turn it over to the studio now because there are a lot of questions. So thank you all, and back to the studio.
For all panelists, how can California incentivize investment? Can it be done in California given the current business climate?
You know, I talked about this earlier, so I'll just say, you know, it absolutely can be done. And I think to some degree it's being considered. And, you know, we're seeing some support for small business coming out of the state government. And I think that we hadn't seen to that level before. So I don't want to be completely critical of our legislature and certainly the governor and his administration. You know, they've been dealing with a really difficult pandemic that's really laid low the businesses in the state, especially the small businesses. But I think that, you know, an incentivizing strategy, you know, make some decisions about what's really important, what industries we want to make sure that come here, stay here, and grow here, in what parts of the state where the needs are the greatest, but the opportunities are pragmatic, maybe in association with some of the major educational institutions. So we can have, you know, greater participation and baccalaureate attainment and those kinds of things, along with incentivizing actual jobs. We've been working on apprenticeships. The governor said we want to create 500,000 new apprenticeships. I believe it's in the next, by 2029, I think is the target year. It's something that we're working on and other groups are doing. Apprenticeships could offer a lot of opportunity, and there's a really big chance for state government as well as regions to provide some support for that, so that businesses feel, you know, that's, you know, not creating any kind of additional requirement, but an opportunity for them. And, you know, a lot of jobs could come out of this, and a lot of very well-trained people who are prepared to do the jobs of the future. So I think it's absolutely possible. And I think it's our job, you know, as the business community, we can't just point the finger and say, you know, we're not at the table. You know, we have to earn our seat at the table. We have to provide leadership. We have to have that vision of what California can be in order to, be able to explain and be effective in saying, in order to achieve that for everybody, not just for the businesses, but for the people of the state, especially for the people who need it most, we need the state to be a real partner in this. But I absolutely think it's achievable.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of investment going into California. 50% of the venture capital invested anywhere in the United States is still being invested in the 9-county Bay Area, with a lot more in California generally. And the amount of development that we're seeing in the logistics industry and elsewhere in the Inland Empire and the Northern San Joaquin Valley is tremendous. I think to Paul's point earlier, we need to figure out how to make that investment what it is that we want it to be. So it's less about, what is banning logistics even? We do a lot of banning in the state, right? We need to think about how do we get this investment to fulfill our values? And so that's going to be a really important priority for the state over the course of the next, several years.
I think being clearer on what those returns are on the investment, the specific economic returns and the other broader social or environmental returns, are important for us to understand and promote. At the LADC, for the last dozen years of the state's film and television tax credit incentive program, we have done every 3 or 4 years an analysis of it for the state, where we've shown that not only does it generate billions of dollars of activity in this state, but it actually generates a positive return to state and local government. For every dollar that the state allows the producers of film and television in the form of a tax credit, which, by the way, they receive a couple of years after they produce the product, it returns about $1.11 to $1.14 to state and local government. So these are the types of analyses we need to do to make sure that what we're doing is really profitable to state and local government, so they'll feel comfortable doing more of it.
Maybe we just our answer to that question was so amazing that we're good. We're good.
Yeah, it's a drop the mic moment, perhaps. Wow. Studio, do we have any more questions for the panelists?
Solving the digital divides requires a national and state collaboration with digital policies that support internet for all. The telecommunication industry has pushed back on many policies to create a broadband for all. Can it be advised to empower and fund municipalities to implement broadband solutions?
I don't know whether the industry will ever encourage the idea of municipal competition, but there are needs for it in certain unserved and underserved areas. And there are opportunities, as Micah mentioned earlier, for middle mile shared infrastructure. And that is something that I think someone in the private sector industry have already been engaged in with some of our local governments in the county of Los Angeles and in other places in the country. And that's, I think, what Micah means by all of the above solutions. Our internet service providers receive capital from their shareholders, from Wall Street, from banks, all of whom require a return on that invested capital. It's expensive to be in their business, particularly if they're in the wireless business where they have to buy spectrum in these multi-billion-dollar auctions our federal government conducts. So we understand that it is difficult for them to deploy in areas where they don't get as significant a return as in others, or the payback period is over a very long time. We all have to work together to try and reduce those costs for them, because the private sector is the most capable of addressing this if we can work with them to simplify and lower the cost of the process. But where they can't, where their business models just don't allow them to, we really do need to encourage them, as Sonny McPeak from the California Emerging Technologies Foundation says, step up to help us or step aside so that we can help others.
I'll go with that.
Studio, do we
For
have
Bill
any?
Allen, can you address any recent data or study LAEDC has regarding the status to the Latino businesses in Los Angeles in comparison to the rest of the market, What are their particular challenges, and how many Latino businesses are in the county of Los Angeles?
So the latest data we had is actually from a 2012 U.S. Census survey of business owners, but even that showed 332,000 Hispanic-owned businesses in Los Angeles County. That's more than any other county in the nation, and that's the vast majority of our minority-owned businesses, which is the largest congregation of minority-owned businesses in the nation. Historically, they have had access to capital challenges, as have most businesses owned by people of color. And that became readily apparent in the pandemic, as our Hispanic-owned businesses did not have the financial reserves to weather and withstand the severe disruption to their revenues caused by the well-intentioned public health orders to slow the spread of the virus. And the initial PPP program was not getting money to Hispanic-owned businesses, particularly the smaller businesses, particularly the micro enterprises. And so not only did all of us on this call advocate with the federal government for changes in subsequent rounds of the program, which allocated more money to go through CDFIs and others, but we worked with the state and our county and our cities to ensure that we set up our own programs that would be more targeted at smaller businesses owned by people of color. And I think those programs have been terrific. I think what the state has done to try, as the governor said earlier today, to allocate $2 billion of capital, particularly to businesses owned by people of color. And what our county did, our county and city of Los Angeles started to set up loan programs. And as we were working with businesses throughout our communities, and particularly Black and Hispanic-owned businesses, we heard that more loans were not going to help. That if you don't have any revenues, it doesn't matter if the loan comes with low interest or no interest, you have no way to pay it back. And so they were seeking grants, and our county and city of Los Angeles collaborated to award about $200 million of grant capital through their allocations of CARES Act funding. So we know that our local businesses were very hard hit, particularly our Hispanic-owned businesses. But I said before, they've been remarkably resilient through the years in working with less capital than has been available to other business owners. And so we brought together a group, the LAEDC, the LA Chamber of Commerce, LISC LA, and other partners working closely with the county and city of LA, created what we call the Together for LA Coalition, or the LA Collaborative for Small Business Resilience and Recovery. And we focused intensive outreach, particularly on Spanish-speaking owners of business. And we're able to really provide technical assistance and access to capital to extraordinary amount of businesses. And we intend to continue that work. All those same partners intend to continue that work well into 2022, because the work is not done. You'll hear a lot of national press about consumer spending has recovered. And in LA County, the latest numbers in March showed consumer spending was back within 2% of pre-pandemic levels. But small business revenues in LA County are still down by more than 30%. Most of us switched during the pandemic to national e-commerce platforms like Amazon or Shopify or Walmart or whatever. Our small businesses are still struggling. They were in the hardest hit sectors, whether it was in travel-related sectors, hospitality-related sectors, personal service-related sectors, as many Latino-owned businesses are. So we've got a lot of continued work to do. Reopening, I like to say, does not equate to recovery. Simply allowing everybody to reopen does not mean crisis averted, everybody's back to normal. It's going to take a few years to rebuild and hopefully reinvent in the process so they can be more resilient, our smallest businesses, and a few years to fully restore the jobs lost to this pandemic, which were disproportionately lost by people of color, young adults, women, and those with lower levels of educational attainment in our region. LA County alone still has 500,000 people unemployed, largely as a result of the pandemic. So we've got a lot of work to continue to do to support our Hispanic business community.
Video, are there any additional questions for our panelists?
No additional questions.
No additional questions.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the attendees and the thoughtful questions. And once again, thank you to the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and your board of directors and your staff for just a wonderful event. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Gerbax.
Be well.
The state is mobilizing at every level to proactively and aggressively protect the health and well-being of Californians. But we cannot fight this outbreak alone. We need the participation and support of every Californian. That is why we're providing recent, relevant, and reliable information. Californians need to know how critical it is to stay home, learn how to stay healthy, and where they can get help. These actions are critical, and there is no doubt our collective efforts save lives.
Let's get you to this moment.
Is that it? Yeah, that's it.
Of relief.
Awesome.
Protection.
Just got vaccinated. I just got vaccinated. Just got vaccinated.
Hope. So that we can get to all the other moments. Let's get you to the exhale you didn't know you were waiting for. Let's get it together so we can be together. Let's get to immunity. Now's your moment to get vaccinated.
Estamos tan cerca de vencer a la pandemia, tan cerca de aclarar tus dudas, porque sabemos que la vacuna será un gran alivio para ti y toda tu familia.
Nos vacunamos por nuestra familia.
Yo me vacuné por mis papás.
Estamos muy cerca de volver a estar cerca. Y para lograrlo, llegó el momento de planear cuándo te podrás poner la vacuna contra el COVID-19. Logremos vencer a la pandemia. Logremos la inmunidad.
We are all doing our part by staying at home. That means household energy use has likely increased, which could mean a rise in energy bills. Here are some simple tips and easy-to-use resources to help us all save energy and money during this difficult time. Energy Upgrade California is a statewide initiative committed to helping Californians be more sustainable natural resources, reduce demand on the energy grid, and make informed choices about their energy use at home and at work, all of which goes a long way for California.
Majestic mountains, scenic coastal highways, fertile farmlands. There's lots to love about California. So put off those chores and use less energy from 4 to 9 p.m. when less clean energy is available. Because that's power down time.
Stay well and keep it golden. And now, back to our program. Please welcome to the stage the CHCC Central Region Chair and Chair of the Advocacy Committee, Marcos Gomez.
Good morning and thank you, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. State Senator Ana M. Caballero was elected November 2018 to the California State Senate to represent the 12th Senate District, which includes the Salinas Valley, San Benito County, Merced County, and portions of Stanislaus, Madera, and Fresno counties. Ana has a 30-year legacy of public service in her community. Ana ran for Salinas City Council, where she served for 7 years, focusing on affordable housing, strengthening the businesses, and commercial opportunities for growth. the redevelopment of downtown, and providing more parks and recreational space for families. Anna later became the first female of Salinas in 1998, where she raised private funds for city libraries, along with putting measures on the ballot to raise money for essential services during the state budget crisis. Anna was later elected to the State Assembly in 2006, where she continued to focus on meeting the needs of local residents as an advocate for education. Anna also voted to extend state students' aid to undocumented students applying for citizenship. From 2010 to 2016, Anna joined Governor Edmund G. Brown's cabinet as Secretary of Business, Consumer Service, and Housing Agencies. Under Anna's leadership, $65 million were allocated to build housing and provide services for homeless veterans and rural communities, while providing struggling families access to homes refinancing assistance. During her time working with Governor Brown, Anna was the highest ranking Latina in state government. Please welcome Senator Ana M. Caballero.
Hello, members of the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I am State Senator Ana Caballero, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to say a few words today. First, I would like to acknowledge the long-standing relationship between CHCC and GoBiz throughout and prior to the pandemic. The CHCC and GoBiz partnered to assist the small business community to provide resources to ensure resiliency and a growing economy. These partnerships ensure that resources get out to the businesses who need them the most. This year, I authored SB 87, which created nearly $2.1 billion in grant relief for small business owners impacted by the pandemic. With the help of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce and their collaboration with Lendistry, CHCC has confirmed that thousands of Latino small businesses statewide have been beneficiaries of the program and received grants of up to $25,000. Additionally, the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, in partnership with the California Department of Public Health, continues to educate small business owners and communities on the importance of COVID-19 vaccinations and how vaccinations are a critical asset to ensure California reopens the economy while keeping families safe. It is clear that the CHCC is a vital and integral part of our small business community, and I look forward to many more opportunities to work together again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Caballero, for taking the time to join us today. As we identify new economic recovery strategies, we value the importance of small business advocacy. The political landscape facing Hispanic and small business panel serves as the CHCC legislative forecast for 2021, a dynamic discussion to be focused on the good, the bad, the ugly of key policies and bills proposed by the California legislature. Please welcome our panel moderator, Vice President of Community Relations for AG Spanos Companies and the CHCC Director at Large, Brenna Butler Garcia.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We have several of our panelists here today to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I have Jose Otilio Hernandez with ID8 California. Hi, Jose. Good morning. We also have Paul Gladfelty with the Apex Group. Hi, Paul.
Good morning, Brenna.
And Manny Diaz with Diaz and Associates. Good morning. And I think we've got you on mute, Manny. So welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be able to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the legislature this year. And I know we're gonna cover several different areas that will have impacts to
Good morning.
Businesses. Good morning, Manny. So let's just start out with what's good. what's taken place this year. I mean, I know that we're coming out of a global pandemic. I know that our elected officials are acutely aware of that, and there's several pieces of policy that are coming down the pipeline that are there to help our small businesses. So let's talk a little bit about what's been some of the positive legislation that we're seeing roll out. Paul, I'm going to start it off with you.
Started with me. Brenna, one of the pieces of legislation was AB 80. That was the PPP loans. There was a provision that did not conform with federal law and therefore didn't allow businesses, small businesses and even large ones as well, to be able to deduct from their state taxes those PPP loans. And so there was legislation. They had to conform with the feds. They had to get some clarity from the federal government, but ultimately it did pass. It does have a provision in it that everybody should be aware of, and that is you had to have at least 25% or more losses from the previous year. And the reason they did that, and we advocated not to have that provision in there because businesses scrambled, and some of which didn't lose as much money, but they had to get those loans nevertheless because they were in a time of uncertainty. And it really came down to the cost to the state, and that was a political decision that they made, and therefore you had to have those losses. But I wanted to make sure everybody was at least aware of that. If you did have losses over 25%, then you would have that full tax deductibility at the state level. So that was a positive development for us.
I think there were a couple of really important allocations that were specified in the budget this year. And Paul, I know you're aware of this as well. The Innovation Hub or iHubs throughout the state have recently had an allocation underneath the Office of GoBiz. And they've got some funding set aside. And this is really game changing, particularly for our iHubs that exist in inland California. And so I think that what we've seen here is a commitment from Sacramento and from the governor and the administration to really invest in inland California consistently. And I know that iHub allocation is really going to be game changing.
Thanks, Brenna. I'm a big proponent of iHubs. I think they're really awesome opportunities, not only for general entrepreneurs, but also for young people who want to get started in a business. The whole purpose is to take innovation and be able to allow it to grow. And you can't do that. It's just like growing a plant. You got to plant the seed, but you got to water it as well. And that water comes in the form of funds. And so the fact that the iHubs are now being funded, I would wish it was 10 times as much, but nevertheless, we'll take $2.5 million. I think that's a start. I think we ought to, as the Hispanic Chambers, continue to push for additional resources. I know it's one-time funding, but I really think we got to push the administration to do more. Because this really can go a long way. I visited iHubs throughout the state before. I see how they operate, provide the necessary startup funding, opportunities, and especially for young people, some of the things you've been doing in the San Joaquin area with the hackathons and things of that nature that get students interested. And we need to get, especially Latino community and young students interested in innovation and think outside of the box, because they're, in my opinion, they're not represented proportionately to the innovation and technology community. We need to do more for our young people in that regard. So I'm a big proponent. Hopefully it stays in this year's budget. I have no reason to believe that it won't. The budget will be signed by July 1st of this year. That's when the new budget starts. And then with these additional resources, they can be put to good use.
Yeah.
Brenda, if I could add on it a little bit, on the private side, there's an organization that's just right now here in Silicon Valley. It's called Manos Capital. Before it was called Manos, it was a Latino accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
And as many of you know, there's a lot of these accelerators out there, like the Asian community and Caucasian community that's been around for a long time, but not for the Latino community, where these accelerators try to help Latinas start their own tech business. So this is a new group that's just being formed by the CEO is Sylvia Flores, a good friend of mine. And Sylvia is going to have a $50 million from the private sector to invest in startups for Latinos and Latinas that want to start their own tech business. So this is something brand new here in Silicon Valley, but it's not just going to be businesses here in Silicon Valley, but really throughout California.
And I know that to be true because I've actually worked with Sylvia when she was really instrumental in being involved in our hackathon, and she's joined in with a representative from one of our board members. I have board members, Cafe Coop and Esperanza Vion. I know she works closely with her. So yeah, that's great to hear. Okay, so we've covered some of the good, but I know that there's also so maybe you want to talk with everybody a little bit more and share some details on that.
Absolutely. So Assembly Bill 257 is introduced by Lorraine Gonzalez. It is sponsored by the Service Employees International Union, otherwise referred to as SEIU. It is part of a national program, and their national program ultimate goal is to try and unionize the quick service industry. And let me give you a little bit of a overview, because I think it's important to place this legislation in perspective. The only way that they can organize a franchisor like a McDonald's, for example, as everybody in the audience knows, and most people are generally aware, that there are many independent franchisees out there. They run independent businesses. Many of them are Hispanic businesses, women-owned businesses, other minorities. And I would venture to say that I know, at least because I do some work for McDonald's, at least in the McDonald's world, I would say a majority of them are either women-owned or Hispanic or minority-owned businesses. For SEIU to organize all of these independent owner-operators out there would be to try and create a relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee, and what is known as a joint employer situation. And the joint employer essentially means that the franchisor has control over decisions about labor and management in an individual franchise. This bill does is it imposes liability on the franchisor and says anytime there's a violation by the franchisee of a labor law violation, that the franchisor is going to be held jointly and severally liable. So that means that the franchisor would have thousands, literally thousands of various complaints that they would have to address on a day-to-day basis, just because, anybody can file a complaint. But whether or not one is meritorious depends on whether or not, the facts of the matter. And so what the union has done here is they have projected a list of horribles and said that the franchise industry in the quick service fast food industry has engaged in disproportionate amount of sexual harassment, labor law violations, a whole variety of accusations, which frankly and factually are not true. And so what they've done is created an 11-person council made up primarily of bureaucrats and organized labor representatives, with 2 representatives, one from the franchisee, one from the franchisor, that is going to determine in the future minimum wage laws, labor laws, how you run your restaurants, and would only apply to those franchisees that are part of a franchise that are 30 franchises or more nationwide. So essentially, Arby's, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, a whole variety of franchises that we all can think of and have gone to eat. Yet these franchisees, this specific group, is now going to have to compete with other restaurants in their community, other restaurants that are well-known restaurants, Starbucks, In-N-Out Hamburger, that are not franchises, but yet they would be operating under a different set of rules. And so this is a very, very terrible bill, because I think ultimately what ends up happening is that if the franchisor is going to have to assume all this liability, that means they're going to have to get involved with the day-to-day operations of the franchisee. And that's not why the franchisee got into business. They don't want to be middle managers. They want to run their own operations. I'm sure that a lot can be said for those people that are on this call today that are franchisees and throughout California. This bill would really turn franchising on its head and sets a very, very bad precedent. We've organized a group. It's just in the nascent stages. We put a name to it called FAIR. Organized labor likes to label lots of different things. They've called this the Fast Recovery Act, which has nothing to do with recovery at all. But and FAIR stands for Franchisees Against Irresponsible Regulation. And so we want to use that as kind of an organizing tool of the franchise community to show just how terrible this bill is. There's even other provisions in there, for example, that says that the labor commissioner could file a claim against a franchisee, even though there was no claimant. So you don't even have to have a claimant, but yet if somebody raises the issue, and we know that the union would probably raise the issue, then the labor commissioner could go after a franchisee and say, well, okay, who's aggrieved here? Well, there's no claim, but yet this bill would give them the right to do so. So lots and lots of bad provisions in this bill. I'll name just one more. Again, this was started in the name of COVID, because they said that franchisees were not providing personal protective equipment. This legislation also states, as a matter of law, that COVID is a foodborne illness. There's no data anywhere that suggests that COVID is a foodborne illness, but yet it could be a health and safety violation, which then leads to more litigation.
Wow. Well, thank you for making us aware of that, Paul. So Manny, what else have you seen come out of this session that may have significant impacts for our members, for small businesses?
Sure. Well, right now the chamber itself is monitoring over 50 bills, as you know, and the chamber has taken a support position on 23 of them. Many of these bills, though, are going to have some kind of fiscal impact, so we don't know what's going to happen yet. There's several bills out there that are trying to propose additional cost relief to our small business community because of COVID. We don't know yet what's going to happen there, because it has to conform to the federal stimulus, requirements on the funding requirements. And so we're hoping that sometime this month we'll know more what's going to happen there. As you know, the governor's going to come up with his May revised proposal, I believe this Friday. He'll come out, and so based on what he says as far as providing additional support for our small business community here in California, we'll know more what's going to happen to some of these bills. Already, Paul mentioned the passage of AB 80. by Burke. That's the one that's going to provide, basically it's going to be a $6.2 billion tax cut to our small business community, but it's going to be spread out over a 5-year period. So that's going to help somewhat. But again, I think we all recognize that we need to do more to continue to support our small business community, especially during this COVID period. And so we'll see what happens here in the next few days. I'm hoping that some of these bills that are going to provide additional cost relief will get support, and usually it's signaled by the budget message that the governor's going to put out in a few days.
Yeah. Jose, how about, what are you seeing?
Again, just macro level, and it kind of echoes what's been said. I mean, the 3 buckets that, I mean, I'd look at, one on the liability issue, and Paul mentioned some of that. I mean, but there's kind of already ideas of maybe sticking things into budget language around liability, and so we should be very vigilant on that. Taxes, I mean, the good thing about, I mean, some of the tax bills is that on the assembly side, put a halt on any tax bills, at least this year, making them, a lot of them 2-year bills. So again, we should kind of look at some of those. And then just the added regulations. I know there are oil and gas regulations, and there was a halt to that, but there this whole notion of continuing to put regulations on business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, good point. You know, I have another question for you, Jose, and it really pertains to the impacts that the business may feel. I know that the state's releasing about 73,000 prisoners and throughout the state, different levels of offenses. But what do you see as either a fiscal impact or otherwise to our business community as a result of that?
So I mean, again, it's half empty, half full. I mean, I can see it as an opportunity. I can see it in terms of, I think there's a couple of the chambers that have really embraced this as an opportunity to hire formerly incarcerated. There was a Wessel bill to give kind of tax credits for individuals that have been formerly incarcerated. I think that in terms of some of our businesses, we all have someone that probably has been touched by the prison system. And so we understand that. So again, from a jobs perspective, there are dollars going out there for reentry, and that might be an opportunity. Again, but then from the just kind of public safety and making sure that property is safe, I think that is a question. Here in LA, the LA Chamber had a kind of 3-part discussion on that. And I think that the agreement was on kind of more services. So we make sure it's not an additional problem, that there is a way to reincorporate formerly incarcerated, maximize those opportunities, so we don't get to the fear aspect in terms of how might this impact our business bottom line.
Yeah, those wraparound services are really going to be critical.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, I mean, I think one of the other things that all of California is reeling from, and our small businesses, you know, and our everyday citizens are watching this homelessness, you know, homelessness issue just explode in California. And I think everybody is crying out for solutions, because people are left without their homes, their lives, their pets, their children, and it's caused just such despair. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what you see from a legislative perspective that's going to help us address the homelessness issue and crisis in California.
Sure.
I'll get that to whoever.
Maybe I'll start from so I mean, the legislative solution to homelessness is add more money. I mean, and sometimes that is not a strategic solution, particularly since if you don't have a real strategy on how to address the issues, homelessness is not a kind of a one-size-fits-all solution. I mean, we all see that there are different levels of homelessness, whether it's you really lost a job, you're 1 paycheck away, you can't make rent, wow, you're homeless. But that's more transition. I mean, there's a way to fix that. Or you've been on the streets for 20 years and there's a real mental health issue, you're schizophrenic. My old boss is a senator, his son was schizophrenic and he chose to live on the street. It's a state senator whose son is choosing to live on the street. I mean, it is a mental health issue. So the spectrum is so different. In LA, I mean, we saw, I mean, how polar the issue is. In O'Farrell's district here in Echo Park, I mean, there was a cleanup, and then you had all the community attacking him for cleaning up the park. Business community loves it as long as it comes with services. Otherwise, you're just moving the homeless issue to just another community. So I think central to this, and we're seeing this in some of the chambers in LA, that there needs to be services attached to the whole aspect of getting people off the public sidewalks. I mean, the whole notion of having a homeless camp right in front of your restaurant is not something that we want to kind of promote. But at the same time, there's real services. So, I mean, long answer is that it's not just a money question. It's what are we going to use those resources for? What's proven? There's already a lot of backlash in terms of the room key that, I mean, again, we're just putting people in a hotel and not really providing them services.
Yeah. Brenna, if I could elaborate further on that. It's being here in San Jose, Silicon Valley here, a survey just came out, I think it was yesterday, for the 9 counties that we have here in the Bay Area, that the number one issue now for residents here is homelessness. 5 years ago, it was in the bottom. Today, it's higher than COVID. And I was really surprised when I saw that survey. And right now, I'll give you an example of what's going on here in San Jose. There was this place in our downtown, we have a river downtown, Willoughby River, with these creeks. And many of our homeless people were living in those creeks, and they had a big campsite there. It was called the Jungle. So a few years ago, because we're talking about close to 1,000 people living on these creeks near downtown, the city decided to basically move the people out of the creeks in the river. And so where could they go? They went to the streets. So now you see them, obviously in the urban areas, you see them in these near the business centers and in our parks more, right? And I was talking to some of our law enforcement folks. That's the number one issue in law enforcement right now, on safety. And it's having a very negative impact on our business. And because a lot of things happen when we have the homeless, going around. And so I was asking, well, is it because homeless folks want to be homeless? And it's, well, only a small percentage want to be homeless, like maybe 20%. The other 80% is because they can't afford, they also don't have the economic means to make a decent living. So they're living in the streets. And so the state is going to do more as far as putting more money, Jose, as you said. But again, you need to have really a coordinated strategy, which I don't think the state of California has really ever had, working with all the, the local communities throughout California and the counties. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that it's going to have to be really a long-term solution.
Yeah. And, and I see a lot of coordination in our region locally here in the northern San Joaquin Valley to find some of those solutions and what works in our community. And I think that there's a lot of people that have devoted significant time and resources and thought to how we can respectfully and effectively help our communities, homelessness and unsheltered. So I think that you're right. It does need to be a long-term solution. I'm glad to see that we're getting investment from the state level that allows our individual communities to invest in solutions that work best for them. But I think there needs to be even more done. So any other thoughts? Jose, did you have
I'm just waiting for the ugly.
Oh, the ugly, yeah.
No, just two things on the ugly. I mean, one thing we saw in terms of COVID and now COVID recovery is the impact this has done in terms of the entire year of virtual education, and particularly for the Latino community. In terms of, I mean, whether it's an income issue, whether it was a language access issue, whether it's just access to broadband issue. I mean, entire year lost for a lot of our fellow Latino members. And we don't see, I mean, as we talk about people coming back slowly in the fall, it's not consistent. So it's going to be different in different communities. And that's the ugly, that we're going to see the growing divide, basically, really exacerbating some of these disparities. And it's going to impact our communities directly and eventually, I mean, our workforce.
And I think, you know, that leads me to something else. I think that for those of us that are participating in this session, many of our members, our small business members, they're struggling to keep their heads above the water as we're dealing with this entire situation financially. But what's your advice to small business owners about how to be effective advocates, about why it's important to track legislation like this, and who should they be tapping on as a resource to get these answers and to make sure that their voices are heard in Sacramento?
Manny Diaz, he's right there. No, the chamber is doing an amazing job of being at the table. So I think that is just participating in this conversation, having Paul and his, I mean, decades of experience in the building. I think that's a great start in being able to voice the concerns and also some of the ideas, recommendations. And then in turn, I mean, we can definitely kind of branch out in terms of how to get involved at the local level. But in terms of Sacramento, I mean, right here you have, I mean, combined in terms of number of years and experience in the building, extremely impressive.
Yeah. Brenda, I as a former state legislator here, I can tell you that the folks at the state capitol, they just don't see enough of our small business leaders or you know, owners expressing their concerns about certain legislation in Sacramento. All the other special interest groups they go there in buses, literally buses. Mm-hmm. And they line up and they speak their mind. And of course, you know, they're going to get the attention of the decision maker, the legislator. So it's very important to be organized, especially on critical issues, business issues, and which on the local level, because as everybody always knows, you know, politics is all local. But if our local small business folks are not expressing their concerns or issues up in Sacramento or in DC, or on the city council for that matter, it doesn't really matter, then it's going to fall on deaf ears. So it's very important to be organized and to keep that line of communication open on advocacy.
But let me add my 2 cents as well. I certainly agree with Jose and Manny on their points. Given the pandemic, the legislative process has gotten a big, I call it clunky, is the word I've used. You know, it started out when they did the shelter in place, and then they did the video conference hearings, and that didn't work very well. They've gotten a little bit better at it. But, you know, right now, you have a maximum of 2 people that can present. Otherwise, you can only say your name and affiliation. They only have 2 minutes to present. It could be a major issue like this 257 that I'm talking about. And you have 4 minutes to talk to a policy committee with 2 people on a major policy issue. And so back to what Manny and Jose said, be involved at the local level, be involved with your local chamber, be involved with the state chamber, especially on those issues that really move you. You know, pick up the phone. It's not difficult to do. Express your interests. Let them know that something affects you, and continue that relationship, because this is a relationship business. And if that legislator knows that you're out there, they know that you employ people, you're providing assistance to the community in your own way. Those are all very, very important things to a state legislator. And you know, don't think that they're not, because they really are.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, Paul. And, you know, I think that over the next 2 days, so Thursday and Friday, the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce is going to be hosting a series of legislative meetings, virtual meetings with our elected representatives throughout the state. And it's critically important that our members are taking the time out to have those conversations. It's important that they share their stories, their challenges, the opportunities that are before them in their communities, and that their elected representatives understand or hear from them about those experiences. It's, you know, they see Paul and Manny and Jose every day, all the time in the building. It's very different when they're talking to a constituent who is facing a real life problem and they have to answer them. So I think that that's really important that we take the time to do these appointments, and as Paul mentioned, pick up the phone and call them when you're faced with an issue. Okay, so do we have any questions from the audience? I'll send that back to headquarters.
Small business owner out of Santa Clara. My question is, because of tax pressures, cost of living and housing, and the harsh regulatory environment in California, we are seeing a continuing exodus of businesses. What public policy measures can be taken to improve the California small business climate? Your opinion or thoughts?
Who wants to take it first?
Well, I'll take it. I mean, I'll just make a couple of comments. In terms of policy measures, we need to continue to support those things that support small business, whether they're tax relief, whether it's regulatory relief, whether or not it's liability relief from private attorney general lawsuits that are plagued by the business community many times. We need to continue to support those things, and we need to fight, just because it is a fight. Okay, it's a bit of a struggle up here. There are certain groups that have a disproportionate amount of influence on the legislature, and I know I came from organized labor many years ago, but organized labor has a disproportionate amount of influence on the legislative process, and they have their own agenda, and oftentimes that agenda collides with the ability for businesses to be successful because they either are hamstrung or it adds more costs or a variety of other reasons. It's not to say you don't want to treat your employees right. Everybody wants to do that. That's in business. But for those things that are important, again, be involved and support those things that matter. Because unless you do that, then somebody else is going to fill the void.
I would say two things and kind of build on what Paul said. I mean, one is changing the narrative. Again, it was the COVID crisis that made a lot of elected officials realize that if the business shuts down, the employees have no jobs, and then they get employment and so forth. And so I think that's why there has been this knee-jerk reaction in terms of really addressing small business needs and preventing that from happening. And we have an opportunity now to change the narrative that business is part of the community. We are employing the community. Two, building a little bit upon what Paul said, and that's more politically active. Unions that are politically active. I know that the chamber, we talked about growing our PAC, but that is something that we need to do at the local and state level to be more politically active and getting people elected that have like minds and like views.
Great point.
I also want to add, Brenda, if it's okay, that as a former policymaker, I would always try to make an effort to reach out to everybody out there and get both sides of the story, especially when it's going to have an impact on our small business community, especially our minority business community. And because you expect, for instance, labor folks to say certain things, pretty predictable what they can tell you. So for me, it was very important to reach out to the small business impacted by whatever was being proposed, to get their side of the story and to get real factual information. Getting that factual information, especially from the business that's going to be impacted, was very helpful to me, so that I could also bring that up in public discussion with my colleagues on the city council or state legislature. Say, you guys, if you're going to do this, this is the people that are going to be impacted. So that would help to change the direction that the legislature or regulation was going. So again, that's why it's so important, as Paul said, for our small business community to really reach out and help educate also our decision makers. Because if they're not hearing the entire story, they're going to go with whatever is being.
Is a waste of time. What can be done to make this process more difficult to minimize the costs and distractions?
Okay. Who wants to take
I was waiting to talk about that in terms of the ugly for this year, because I mean, it's going to be ugly, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And the unfortunate part is that the train already left, and it's going to happen. So, I mean, I think we're all there for the last recall, except this one's going to be more expensive because there's going to be the absentee ballot, the aspect of it, and there's going to be more money in terms of it. But it's coming. It's more of a bracing yourself kind of response versus how do you delay it. But it is going to be it's already distracting conversations. I think the opportunity, though, is getting the governor's attention on different matters, getting the administration to open up and having more discussions, having more communities get access to the administration. That could be an opportunity that comes from it.
Great points.
I would just add, maybe one of the things to consider is perhaps a higher threshold, voter threshold, perhaps some type of criteria as to, rather than you just don't like the governor, have some type of criteria that could be imposed that would have to be some type of malfeasance or misconduct or something that would impose a higher threshold than what we have today. I know that there was legislation in that to do something along these lines, not along the lines of what I just said, but to impose some additional standards. And I think that that did not move. The Josh Newman legislation.
Yeah.
Well, I might add was recalled, but in his own district. But.
Yeah. Well, so I want to, Manny, do you have anything?
Just a waste of a lot of money.
So I want to thank all of you today, and I hope that our audience recognizes the fact that we get your expertise. Normally, companies are retaining you individually, and we're so fortunate that by way of being a California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce member, we have access to all of you. And so I appreciate you so much sharing your insights and kind of having insider knowledge on legislation and our session right now. So thank you, Jose, Paul, and Annie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Brenna.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Our work does not end. We want to invite you all to upcoming webinars and resources for our Hispanic and small business owners. Owners are provided with quality consulting and advising services and are cognizant of the full range of economic development tools and resources. We can provide the services and resources to a broader section of the Hispanic and diverse business community through our relationship. The relationship also provides the resources to ensure training and tools in Spanish and English. For technical assistance, please email consulta@cahcc.com or call 1-833-4BIZ-HELP. For our small business owners and your extended networks, please join the CHCC and the California District Offices of SBA for an informational webinar on Thursday, May 6, 2021 at 3 p.m. to access key resources and information pertaining to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, a $28.6 billion program that provides funding for restaurants to meet payroll, purchase supplies, and transition to today's COVID-restricted marketplace. To register, please click on the banner at www.cahcc.com. Last and definitely not least, please save the date for the CHCC 2021 Annual Statewide Convention. Each year, our annual statewide convention gathers Hispanic business owners, corporate executives, and members from over 100 local and regional Hispanic chambers of commerce and business association statewide, as well as from throughout the nation. It offers all attendees the opportunity to establish strategic, long-lasting partnerships through direct personal engagement, sharing of best practices, dialogue, networking, workshops, and more. We look forward to you joining us in Palm Springs from September 9th to September 11th as we continue our work to champion smart practices and policies that lead to growth and innovation. Registration opens on May 25th, 2021 at 12 p.m. On behalf of the CHCC Foundation, our board of directors, we thank you for your participation. Stay safe, be well, and we will see you in September.